illegal immigrants voting in our elections is very rare. Well, number one, how about we put it to 0, okay? Even if you're right. Number two, you're not right. It happens way more often than a lot of people appreciate. In fact, just this week, ICE arrested an illegal immigrant. I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I get it right. An illegal immigrant from Mauritania who's voted in 7 federal elections since 2008. And I have it on good authority that in every single election he voted for Don Davis. No, I don't know about that. I don't know where he voted, but I guarantee it wasn't for us. Okay, it wasn't for America First policies. Now, here's the thing, though. Even if you take the Democrats at their word, even if illegal aliens voting is very rare, then why don't we ban it anyway? It's not that complicated. It is one thing to say, I don't get it. The Democrats say, this never happens, or it happens only very rarely on the one hand, and on the other hand, we must not stop it. It doesn't make a damn bit of sense. We need to get all illegal aliens stopping from voting in our elections. It's very common sense stuff. But even on that, Don Davis could not be persuaded to vote for the people of this district. That's like an 85% issue. You look at the majority of even Democrats across our country, a solid majority of Democrats want to pass the Save America Act, but not the guy who allegedly represents the state of North Carolina, who represents this district. So you got to kind of ask yourself, if you got a guy who votes against tax cuts for Social Security, if Don Davis votes against tax cuts for people making under $100,000 a year, if Don Davis votes against going to war against illegal aliens, and violent criminals, then Don Davis doesn't really represent you. Let's vote for Lori, a person who will, and will do so proudly. Now, I want to say a couple other things because I've given Don Davis a lot of attention here, and now I'm going to go on to Roy Cooper. So first of all, on every single thing, now Roy wasn't in Washington, D.C., but on every single one of these critical wins for the Trump administration to have gotten for the people of this district, the people of the state, Roy Cooper would have voted against all that. That's reason number one, we can't send a guy to the Senate. We want a senator who represents you. We want a senator who doesn't represent illegal aliens and fraud, but who represents hard work and the good people of the state of North Carolina. And because we want those things, we need Michael Whatley in the United States Senate, not Roy Cooper. Michael. Now, he stood up and clapped for that. It would have been a bad sign if he would have stood up and clapped for that, but he passed the test there. So here's the thing about Roy Cooper, okay? So there's been a lot of debate about what exactly our foreign policy should be with regards to Russia and Ukraine. The president of the United States has been very clear. He wants the killing to stop. He wants to get back to commerce. He wants to stop the innocent people who are losing their lives in that conflict. I happen to admire that. Of course, I'm biased, but I think that's the right idea. Now, here's the crazy thing, though, about Roy Cooper. Roy Cooper is one of these people who clearly cares way more for foreign countries than he does the United States of America. You see the passion in his voice when he talks about protecting illegal aliens. You'll never hear that passion when he's talking about the people in this room. You hear the passion in his voice when he talks about sending hundreds of billions of dollars to the war in Ukraine. And yet, the one Ukrainian Roy Cooper didn't care about was this innocent girl, Irina, who had her throat slashed by a person who should have never been on the streets of this country to begin with. So ask yourself, why did he spend his entire career making it hard to lock up violent criminals? Why did he spend his entire career going after our brave police officers who are trying to keep our streets safe? Why does he care so much about the war in Ukraine 6,000 miles away, but doesn't give a damn about an innocent Ukrainian girl who lost her life in our backyard because he wouldn't do his job? And the simple fact is that Roy Cooper doesn't stand for you. He doesn't fight for you. He will never fight for you, but Michael Whatley will. He better, but he will. I know he will. He's a good man. I know he will. Let me just say a couple of final things because I want to brag on the president. I want to brag on what we've been able to accomplish in Washington. First of all, we under the Biden administration, we dug ourselves a hole in this country. We got to be honest about that fact. The average American family under Joe Biden's leadership lost about $3,300 in take-home pay. Now, that was a combination of higher taxes, but also that terrible inflation crisis that we had when Joe Biden was president. When Joe Biden was president, not a single month did we see inflation as low as it was last month and the month before under Donald Trump's leadership. That's something big to brag on. That's something big to celebrate. Because what that means is that you and your families can afford to live a better life. When Joe Biden was spending all that money on green new scams, when he was driving up the cost of everything, he was making it hard for you and your families to get by in this beautiful country that all of us love. So I happen to think it's a pretty nice thing that we've got a president of the United States that is not fighting to give away hundreds of billions of dollars to green energy scams, but is fighting to keep the American people's money in the American people's pocket, because that's exactly where it belongs. But what we've seen in about a year and a month, I guess, of President Trump's leadership is that the average American family, while they lost $3,200 when Biden was president, they've gained about $1,300 while Donald Trump was president. Now, that's dollars and cents. Now, there's a good news and a bad news to that. The good news is that means you're $1,300 richer than you were about a year ago. That's what we're fighting for. That's what we care the most about, is your prosperity. The bad news is we are still going to dig ourselves out of that hole that Joe Biden put us in. I think the best way to confront this problem is to be honest about it. And we all know Joe Biden put us in a big hole. So to the Democrats who talk about affordability a lot of the time, why don't you look yourselves in the mirror? Because the president who caused an affordability crisis was Joe Biden, and the president who has made the American people $1,300 richer is Donald J. Trump. We got all these things we could talk about. We could talk about the fact that we have homicides in this country at the lowest level that they have been in 125 years. Unreal. Just absolutely unbelievable progress on so many of these issues. And we got to talk about, why is it that we got homicides so low? And I'll give you two reasons. Number one, the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States happen to believe that we ought to be using federal power to support our cops instead of fighting against them. Isn't that common sense? But we also believe that the best way to lower homicides and carjackings and other violent crime is to get the illegal alien criminals out of the United States of America, and that's what we've been doing. And I just can't get over the fact that Democrats are so passionate about defending the rights of illegal aliens over American citizens. It is the one thing that will get the Democrats really fired up. A few weeks ago, we had the State of the Union address. And like the Speaker of the House, I'm one of the people who has a very unique perspective into the State of the Union, because I'm sitting directly behind the President of the United States. And maybe my favorite point in that whole speech is when and he actually added this line towards the end of the day before he gave the speech, but where he says, I'm going to say something, and I want you to stand up and applaud if you agree with it. And he says, we believe that the American government should serve the interests of the American people, not illegal aliens. Okay, again, a layup for our friend Don Davis. He should have been up there clapping and cheering. Who could possibly disagree with that? But of course, he did nothing like the rest of the Democrats. But the funny thing about it is they were so miserable because they realized that we had them in a bind. You could tell even a few of them were looking around like, well, this is like, we should be standing up and clapping for this. But like, is our leaders going to get mad at us? Is Nancy Pelosi going to take away some of our campaign money? You could tell they didn't know what to do. And that's maybe the biggest indictment of the modern Democratic Party. We talk about all these policies that you and I care about. We talk about lowering taxes on Social Security, about putting more money in your pocket. We talk about bringing tons of resources into this country to rebuild the American economy, public safety. All this stuff matters. But the thing that maybe matters way more than any single issue is that Democratic leadership in Washington, D.C., they cannot stand up for the simple principle that they fight for you and not an illegal alien. They can't stand up and clap for the fact that we're going to go to war on fraud in this country like we've never done, instead of taking your hard-earned money and giving it to people who don't deserve it. The entire Democratic Party, all of these policy disagreements, all of that stuff doesn't matter compared to the fact that they don't see themselves as